The quantum sensors aboard the UES Prometheus screamed a warning as another volley of Nexian plasma torpedoes streaked past the hull, their perfect formation a testament to the enemy's technological superiority. Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with narrowed eyes, her mind racing through combat scenarios as her experimental vessel pushed its unconventional engines to their limit. Status of the quantum shield modulation. She called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The bridge of humanity's most advanced warship was bathed in the red glow of battle stations, its crew working with practiced efficiency. Holding at 63%, Captain, responded Lieutenant Marcus Wong from the engineering station. His fingers danced across holographic controls as he fought to maintain the experimental defensive systems. But the Nexians are adapting faster than we can cycle frequencies. Their targeting algorithms are perfect. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Perfect. That word had haunted humanity since the Nexian Empire had emerged from the galactic core 3 years ago. Their ships moved with impossible precision, their weapons never missed, and their strategies seemed flawless. One by one, human colonies had fallen to their relentless advance. Dr. Rivera, what are you seeing in their attack patterns? Sarah asked, turning to their chief scientist. The brilliant quantum physicist had been analyzing Nexian combat data since the war began, searching for any weakness in their seemingly impenetrable defenses. Dr. Elena Rivera didn't look up from her station, her dark eyes fixed on streams of data flowing across multiple screens. There's something here, Captain. Something we've been missing. Her voice carried an undertone of excitement that made Sarah take notice. Their perfection. It's not natural. The statistical variations in their movements, their responses, they're too precise. The ship shuddered as another barrage of enemy fire impacted their shields. We've got 3 Nexian cruisers on an intercept course, announced Commander James Harrison from Tactical. Standard pursuit formation Delta 7. They're not even trying to hide their approach. Why would they? Sarah muttered. They've never needed to before. She moved to Dr. Rivera's station, studying the complex equations and pattern analyses on display. Talk to me, Elena. What are you seeing? Look at this. Elena highlighted a section of data. Every Nexian ship moves in perfect synchronization, down to the quantum level. At first, we thought it was just advanced AI coordination, but this, she shook her head. This is something else. Their entire fleet operates as a single quantum network. Sarah's eyes widened as the implications hit her. A neural network. Connected through quantum entanglement. Not just connected. Elena's voice grew more excited. They're completely dependent on it. Every decision, every action, all processed through a perfect, unified system. It's why they're so effective, and potentially why they're vulnerable. The Prometheus rocked again as enemy fire found its mark. Shields at 40%. Marcus called out. We can't take much more of this, Captain. Sarah returned to her command chair, her mind racing. Elena, if their entire fleet operates on a quantum neural network, what happens if we introduce an anomaly? Something their perfect system can't process. In theory. Elena's fingers flew across her console, running simulations. It could cascade through their entire network. But Captain, we'd need to get close enough to interface with their quantum field, and their shields are impenetrable. Impenetrable to conventional weapons, Sarah corrected, a plan forming in her mind. But the Prometheus isn't conventional, is she? She opened a channel to engineering. Chief Adams, remember that quantum resonance experiment we were saving for a rainy day? The one that could tear our engines apart, came the gruff response. Yes, ma'am. Been hoping you'd forget about that one. How quickly can you modify it to generate a targeted quantum pulse? There was a pause, filled only by the sound of distant explosions. 20 minutes, maybe 15 if we bypass every safety protocol we have. But Captain, we'd only get one shot. After that, the engines will be fried. One shot is all we need. Sarah's voice carried a steel edge of determination. Elena, Work with engineering. If we can create a quantum pulse that mimics their network protocols but carries an impossible mathematical paradox, we could poison their entire system. Elena finished, already moving toward the engineering access tube. It would be like introducing a virus into a computer that's never known disease. Status of pursuit. Sarah called to tactical. They're still following the same attack pattern, Captain, James reported. 12 minutes until they're in optimal firing range. We won't survive another full barrage. Sarah nodded, her decision made. Plot a course directly for the center ship. Maximum thrust on my mark. She opened a shipwide channel. All hands, this is the captain. In 15 minutes, we're either going to change the course of this war or go down trying. I need everyone's best work now more than ever. The responses came back immediately. Acknowledgements from every section. Every crew member ready to risk everything on one desperate gamble. The Prometheus might be humanity's last hope, but Sarah knew it wasn't their technology that would save them. It was their ability to think differently, to adapt, to try the impossible. As she watched her crew work, Sarah remembered something her father used to say. Perfection is the enemy of survival. The Nexians had spent millennia pursuing perfection, creating a system without flaw or variation. But in doing so, they'd forgotten one of the fundamental laws of nature, the ability to adapt, to embrace imperfection, to evolve. Now it was time to teach them that lesson. The engineering bay of the UES Prometheus had been transformed into an impromptu research lab, with holographic displays showing cascading quantum formulas and dissected Nexian communication protocols. Dr. Elena Rivera stood at the center of the controlled chaos, her eyes tracking multiple simulations at once while Chief Adams and his engineering team worked to modify the ship's experimental quantum drive. The problem isn't creating the paradox, Elena explained, manipulating a 3D representation of the Nexian quantum network. It's packaging it in a way their system will accept as valid data. She looked up at Captain Chen, who had come down to check on their progress. Their network is perfect, remember. It automatically rejects anything that doesn't match its expected parameters. Sarah studied the complex web of quantum connections displayed before them. Then we don't try to match their parameters, she said slowly, an idea forming. We become their parameters. Chief Adams looked up from the quantum drive assembly he was modifying, his face streaked with coolant residue. You're talking about mimicking their entire command structure. That's impossible. Their encryption alone would take years to crack. We don't need to crack it. Elena suddenly straightened, excitement lighting her features. We just need to become part of it. Look at this. She pulled up data from their previous encounters with Nexian vessels. Their quantum network doesn't just coordinate their ships, it defines them. Every Nexian vessel is literally part of their collective consciousness, which is why they're so effective in combat. Sarah nodded. But also why they can't operate independently. They're too perfect, too integrated. Exactly. Elena's fingers flew across her console, making adjustments to their quantum pulse design. What if instead of trying to hack their network, we trick it into thinking we're a new node? A perfect, trusted component that just happens to be carrying an impossible instruction set. From his position at the modified drive controls, Lieutenant Wong spoke up. Like a sleeper agent carrying a virus. But Captain, to do that, we'd need to understand their quantum protocols at a fundamental level. We'd need a piece of their network. Sarah finished. She turned to Commander Harrison, who had been quietly observing from the doorway. James, what's the status of that debris we collected from our last skirmish? Minimal useful hardware, but we did recover what looks like a quantum communication node. It's heavily damaged, but the core architecture might still be intact. Get it down here, Sarah ordered. Elena, how long would it take you to reverse engineer their quantum protocols from a damaged node? With an intact system. Days. With damaged hardware. Elena shook her head. It would be like trying to understand an entire language from a torn page. Unless. She turned to Chief Adams. The Prometheus's quantum core. It's based on some of the same principles, isn't it? Not as advanced, but similar underlying technology. The chief engineer nodded slowly, understanding dawning. We could use our own systems as a translation matrix. It wouldn't be perfect, but perfect is exactly what we don't want to be. Sarah smiled. How long? 6 hours, minimum, Elena calculated. And we'll need to drop out of warp to make the final adjustments. The spatial distortions would interfere with the calibration. The moment we drop out of warp, every Nexian ship in the sector will be on us, James warned. Sarah's expression hardened with determination. Then we'll need a place where we can turn that to our advantage. She moved to the main tactical display, studying the sector map. Her eyes landed on a particular region, and a grim smile formed. The Helix Nebula. The radiation interference would mask our exact position, and the magnetic storms would give us cover for the power fluctuations. That's crazy, Chief Adams protested. The nebula's particle density would play hell with our shields. And the Nexians. The Nexians will follow us in, Sarah finished, because their perfect tactical algorithms say they should press their advantage. They won't be able to help themselves. Elena was already running simulations. The nebula's radiation could actually help us. If we calibrate our quantum pulse to resonate with the natural electromagnetic frequencies, we could amplify our signal. Wong finished, catching on. Turn the entire nebula into one giant quantum transmitter. Sarah looked around at her crew, the brilliant scientist, the veteran engineer, the tactical officer who had survived a dozen impossible battles. Each of them represented the best of humanity. Adaptable, creative, willing to take risks, and try the impossible. Get started on the modifications, she ordered. James, plot us a course to the Helix Nebula, but make it look like we're trying to avoid it. I want the Nexians to think they're herding us exactly where they want us to go. As her crew rushed to their tasks, Sarah took a moment to study the tactical display showing the pursuing Nexian fleet. Their ships moved in perfect, beautiful formations, each vessel a part of their greater whole, each action calculated to mathematical precision. They were the product of a civilization that had spent millennia pursuing perfection, eliminating variables, removing uncertainty. But uncertainty, Sarah knew, was humanity's greatest weapon. The ability to adapt, to improvise, to embrace chaos, and turn it to advantage. These were the traits that had kept their species alive through countless challenges. Now, those same traits might just save them all. The Prometheus's engines hummed as they prepared for their desperate gambit. In 6 hours, they would either change the course of the war or join the long list of human ships that had fallen to the Nexians' perfect war machine. But as Sarah watched her crew work, seeing the determination in their eyes and the innovation in their actions, she knew one thing for certain. They would not go quietly. The Helix Nebula loomed before them, its swirling clouds of purple and green energy creating a spectacular and deadly display. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the UES Prometheus as tendrils of ionized gas reached out like ghostly fingers, their sensor readings causing warning lights to flash across every console. Radiation levels are already affecting our outer shields, Lieutenant Wong reported from engineering. The nebula's worse than we thought, Captain. These particle storms could tear us apart before the Nexians even get the chance. Status of pursuit? Sarah asked, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Commander Harrison's response was grim. 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers, maintaining standard pursuit formation. They're pushing us exactly where they want us to go, or so they think. Dr. Rivera, how are we doing with the quantum pulse modifications? Elena's voice came through the comm system from engineering, where she was working with Chief Adams on their desperate plan. We've successfully integrated the Nexian quantum node with our systems. The nebula's radiation is actually helping mask our testing. They can't distinguish our quantum signatures from the background noise. Sarah nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan. A plan that any Nexian tactical computer would label as suicidal, which was precisely why it might work. Entering the nebula's outer boundary in 3 minutes, Wong announced. Shield modifications are holding, but our visibility will be severely reduced once we're inside. The Nexians will have the same problem, Sarah reminded them, but they'll follow us in anyway. Their perfect tactical algorithms won't allow them to let us escape. The first waves of turbulence hit the ship as they crossed into the nebula proper. The view screens filled with swirling clouds of energized particles, creating an otherworldly aurora that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. Energy spike, Harrison called out. The Nexians are launching probes. Standard search pattern. Delta 7. Sarah finished with him. Of course, they never deviate from their protocols, even when the situation calls for adaptation. She opened a channel to engineering. Elena, we're about to have company. How close are we? Final calibrations are complete, Elena reported. But Captain, there's something you need to see. The Nexian quantum protocols. They're not just programming. There's something organic about them. Sarah frowned. Explain. It's like their entire network is a living thing, Elena continued. These patterns we're seeing, they're not just data streams. They're closer to neural impulses, I think. I think we might be dealing with some kind of collective consciousness. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying their ships aren't just connected. They're part of a single entity, which means our plan might do more than just disrupt their network. Elena's voice was heavy with the weight of discovery. We could be affecting their actual consciousness. The ship shuddered as another particle storm washed over them. Multiple contacts, Harrison announced. The Nexian fleet is entering the nebula. They're splitting up to surround us. Sarah made her decision. We're past the point of no return. Elena, prepare the quantum pulse. James, plot us a course to the heart of the nebula. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it where the particle density is highest. That's suicide, Wong protested. The radiation levels in the nebula's core will amplify our signal by an order of magnitude. Elena cut in. The captain's right. If we're going to affect their entire network, we need every advantage we can get. The Prometheus plunged deeper into the nebula, its modified shields straining against the onslaught of energized particles. Behind them, the Nexian fleet followed in perfect formation, their superior technology allowing them to press their advantage despite the hazardous conditions. In engineering, Elena and Chief Adams made the final adjustments to their hybrid quantum system. The salvaged Nexian node pulsed with an eerie light as they integrated it with the ship's experimental drive. Ready for quantum pulse initiation, Elena reported. But Captain, I should warn you. Once we start this, there's no way to predict exactly how their network will react. We could be opening Pandora's box. Sarah watched as the tactical display showed the Nexian ships moving into position around them, their pattern flawless despite the nebula's interference. Humanity opened Pandora's box the moment we reached for the stars, she replied. But we've never let fear of the unknown stop us before. All hands, prepare for quantum pulse initiation. Let's show the Nexians why perfection isn't always the answer. The heart of the Helix Nebula blazed around them, its swirling energies creating a backdrop for what might be humanity's last stand, or their greatest victory. As Sarah gave the order to begin the pulse sequence, she couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Nexians had spent millennia pursuing perfect order, creating a system without flaw or variation. Now, that very perfection might be their undoing, brought down by a species that had learned to thrive in chaos. The quantum pulse began to build, its energy merging with the nebula's natural phenomena. In moments, they would find out if human ingenuity could truly triumph over alien perfection. The fate of both species hung in the balance, waiting to see which would prove stronger, the perfect order of the collective or the beautiful chaos of individual will. The quantum pulse erupted from the Prometheus like a newborn star, its energy amplified by the swirling particles of the Helix Nebula. Captain Sarah Chen watched as the tactical display showed the wave of quantum energy expanding outward, seeking the perfect network that bound the Nexian fleet together. Pulse strength at maximum. Elena's voice called out from engineering. The nebula's electromagnetic field is amplifying the signal far beyond our projections. Nexian ships are receiving the transmission. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy vessels maintained their perfect formation, their weapons still locked on the Prometheus position. Then, something changed. "Captain," Harrison called out, his voice tight with tension. "I'm detecting irregularities in the Nexian fleet's movement patterns. Their formation is shifting." Sarah leaned forward in her command chair. "Show me." The tactical display revealed what looked like a ripple moving through the Nexian fleet. Ships began to drift slightly out of position, their perfect synchronization wavering for the first time since the war began. "Their quantum network is attempting to process our paradox," Elena reported, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and concern. "The organic components we detected, they're reacting exactly like a biological system encountering a virus for the first time." The bridge crew watched in fascination as the effect spread through the enemy fleet. Nexian ships began to move erratically, their actions no longer bound by the perfect algorithms that had made them so formidable. "They're trying to adapt," Elena continued, her eyes fixed on the quantum readings. "But their system can't handle the contradictions we've introduced. It's like watching an immune system attack itself." Suddenly, the nearest Nexian cruiser fired its weapons, not at the Prometheus, but at one of its own destroyers. The shot went wide, missing by meters instead of scoring the perfect hit that had been the hallmark of Nexian warfare. "Their targeting systems are compromised," Harrison reported. "They're losing their perfect coordination." "But Captain," he paused, studying his readings, "I'm detecting something else. Some kind of signal emanating from the Nexian ships. It sounds almost like—" "Put it on speakers," Sarah ordered. A sound filled the bridge that made everyone's blood run cold. It was like nothing human ears had ever heard before, a mixture of electronic signals and something that could only be described as screaming. "My God," Elena whispered, "they're in pain." The collective consciousness, we're not just disrupting their network, we're hurting them. Sarah felt the weight of command press down on her shoulders. They had theorized that the Nexian network might be partially organic. But this, can we modify the pulse? Target just their weapons and propulsion systems? "Negative," Elena replied. "The network is too integrated. We can't affect one system without affecting their entire consciousness." More Nexian ships were firing now, their perfect formation completely broken. Some vessels drifted aimlessly, while others engaged in random acts of friendly fire. The nebula's swirling energies were filled with the chaos of a perfect system coming apart at the seams. "Captain," Wong called out from engineering, "our quantum drive is reaching critical levels. The pulse is drawing more power than we anticipated. We need to shut it down, or we'll lose the whole system." Sarah watched the tactical display, her mind racing. They had succeeded in disrupting the Nexian fleet, but at what cost? These weren't just machines they were fighting. They were minds, consciousness, possibly even souls. "New contact." Harrison's voice cut through her thoughts. Massive quantum surge from the edge of the nebula. Captain, it's unlike anything we've seen before." The sensors revealed a new ship emerging from the chaos, larger than any Nexian vessel they had encountered, its design both familiar and alien at the same time. As it approached, the erratic behavior of the other Nexian ships began to stabilize. The quantum readings from that ship, Elena's voice was filled with awe. "It's not just part of their network. It might be the source of it. The core of their collective consciousness." Sarah straightened in her chair. "All hands, battle stations. This isn't over yet. Elena, can you modify the pulse to focus on that new ship?" "Yes, but Captain, if that ship really is the core of their consciousness, we're not just talking about disrupting their fleet anymore. We could be talking about the existence of their entire species." The massive Nexian vessel drew closer, its presence somehow different from the mechanical perfection they had come to expect. There was something almost regal about its approach, something that spoke of age and wisdom rather than just technological superiority. "They're hailing us," Harrison reported, surprise evident in his voice. Sarah took a deep breath, understanding that they had reached a pivotal moment, not just in the battle, but in the history of both species. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Let's find out what happens when perfection meets chaos face to face." The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as the communication channel opened. The next few moments would determine whether humanity's desperate gambit would lead to victory, understanding, or mutual destruction. The bridge of the UES Prometheus fell silent as the communication channel opened. Instead of the expected mechanical precision of Nexian transmissions, a single consciousness reached out, ancient, vast, and surprisingly human. "You have done something unprecedented." The voice resonated through the bridge, carrying harmonics that seemed to touch both mind and soul. "In 10,000 years, no species has managed to disrupt our perfect unity." Sarah stood from her command chair, facing the visual projection that had appeared. The being before them was neither fully organic nor mechanical, a synthesis of consciousness and technology that defied easy categorization. "We didn't set out to harm you," Sarah responded. "We were defending ourselves, our worlds, our right to exist as we are." "Yes," the entity acknowledged. "As you are. Imperfect. Individual. Chaotic. We sought to bring order to the galaxy, to unite all consciousness in perfect harmony. We had forgotten what it meant to be separate." Elena's voice came through from engineering, where she was still monitoring the quantum readings. "Captain, the disruption we caused, it didn't just affect their network. It's forcing individual thought patterns to emerge within their collective consciousness. The pain you heard," the Nexian entity continued, "was not of destruction, but of awakening. For millennia, we have been one mind, one purpose, one perfect unity. Your quantum virus has reintroduced something we had engineered out of ourselves, the capability for individual thought." The tactical display showed the Nexian fleet continuing to stabilize, but differently now. Ships began moving in patterns that showed initiative rather than just perfect coordination. The virus, Sarah realized. It's not just disrupting your network, it's liberating it, breaking down the barriers between individual consciousness and collective thought. "Yes," the entity's response carried what might have been wonder. "We pursued perfection so single-mindedly that we forgot its greatest enemy is also its greatest strength: diversity. The ability to think differently, to disagree, to evolve. We made ourselves perfect, and in doing so, we stopped growing." Chief Adams' voice cut through from engineering. "Captain, the quantum drive is stabilizing. Whatever's happening out there, it's taking the strain off our systems." The massive Nexian vessel moved closer, its presence now feeling less threatening and more curious. "Your species fascinated us," the entity continued. "Your chaos, your inefficiency, your constant struggle between individual desire and collective good. We saw it as a weakness to be corrected. Now we understand it was strength we had sacrificed in our pursuit of perfection." Sarah watched as more Nexian ships began moving independently, their actions showing the first signs of individual initiative, while still maintaining a degree of coordination. "What happens now?" she asked. "Your empire, your unity." "Will change," the entity responded. "Must change. Your quantum virus has shown us a path we had forgotten existed. A balance between unity and individuality. The pain you heard was the birth cry of something new, a consciousness that can be both one and many, perfect and imperfect, ordered and chaotic." Alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. "Multiple quantum signatures," Harrison called out. "Nexian ships are appearing throughout the sector, but they're not attacking. They're communicating. With each other, with the entity, all independently." "The awakening spreads," the entity explained. "Through our network, your gift of chaos travels to all our kind. We will not continue our expansion, our attempt to force perfection upon others. Instead, we must learn again what we forgot: how to grow, how to change, how to be gloriously imperfect. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle around them. What had begun as a desperate military gambit had become something far more profound: the liberation of an entire species from the prison of its own perfection. "We would learn from you," the entity continued. "Your ability to maintain unity while celebrating diversity, to find strength in imperfection, to evolve through chaos rather than stagnate in order. In return, we offer what knowledge we can share, not as conquerors, but as equals seeking understanding." The bridge crew exchanged glances, the magnitude of what they had achieved slowly sinking in. They had not just saved humanity. They had freed an ancient species from its self-imposed bonds, opening the door to a future none of them could have imagined. "We accept," Sarah responded, speaking for her crew, her species, and a future where human ingenuity and Nexian wisdom might together forge something greater than either could achieve alone. As the Helix Nebula swirled around them, its chaotic energies a fitting backdrop to this historic moment, Sarah reflected on the irony of their victory. The Nexians had spent millennia pursuing perfect order, only to be saved by the very chaos they had sought to eliminate. Humanity's greatest weapon had not been technology or military might, but their fundamental nature, their beautiful, chaotic, imperfect ability to think differently. The war was over, not through destruction, but through transformation. As the Prometheus's crew began the work of establishing diplomatic channels with their former enemies, Sarah knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. The moment when perfection learned the value of imperfection, when unity discovered the strength of diversity, and when two vastly different species found common ground in the space between order and chaos.